Well, thank you, Rhian. And thank you also for the invitation to take part in this discussion in the ArtWorks Cymru conference. I want to talk about how Literature Wales has been developed the participative arts over the last few years, and what this means to me and us as a national company, considering as well some of the challenges and problems that we have in this field. Now, the aim of Literature Wales is to celebrate and support words of all kinds. Now, it was established in 2011 by merging Academy and the Tŷ Newydd Writing House. Now, it was clear from the start that we didn't want to be just the sum of the parts only. Indeed, what we wanted to do was to carve our own identity and our own mission, and it's fair to say that the institution that we see today is quite different to the previous two. So the first stage in this process of reinventing or recreating ourselves was not to preach to the flock. And we're very lucky in Wales that literature is one of our main art forms. It is not elitist, it is vibrant and verbal in the mouths of people across our country. It's our literary tradition that is in fact the oldest in Europe, and thanks to the popularity of eisteddfods and poetic events in pubs and on Twitter, that tradition has galloped happily into the 21st century. By building on these deep foundations, we were enabled to look around and start to see that literature exists everywhere. Indeed, literature is one of the most accessible art forms. And during our lives, we will hear and see stories and rhymes around us regularly in books, on posters, on screens, on stage and online. And by redefining what is considered as literature and opening it up to include all sorts of expressions and forms, we were able to include a wider range of participants in our work. And through this, we came to define our new mission. And simply what it means is that literature belongs to everyone and is available everywhere. So to realise this mission, we had to adapt and refocus what was done already. Academy already had a long tradition and an intense experience of working with children, young people, and also within our communities. Now, this Authors on Tour scheme, for example, Llandrindod, which enables schools and all sorts of institutions to get the funding to support a visit from an author, has been running for decades. And on top of this, there are schemes like the Young Person's Writing Squad and the Children's Poet of Wales. They're long and well established and are very valuable and familiar to teachers and pupils alike. And over the years, hundreds of thousands of people have enjoyed a literary event through these schemes. And Literary Wales regularly comes to the top of our the Arts Council of Wales literary charts, as it were, where over 160,000 people, which includes 60,000 young people, have enjoyed our literary events. Well, that's all very good, but why change? Well, in considering the provision, we came to the conclusion that a number of these were one-off events and short ones, and since traditionally we've always responded to every application until the pot went empty, very often it was those that knew about the funding that would always receive it every year. So what about all the schools and other areas that were not aware of those opportunities? It was obvious, therefore, that we had to change this reactionary way of distributing our funding and consider other guidelines and priorities. One of the new initiatives of Literature Wales was to establish the role of the Young People's Laureate for Wales. Now, originally, we were asked to establish an English version of the very popular Child's Poet for Wales, but rather than creating a photocopied version, what we did was look around to see what else was available. Now, in England, there is a Children's Laureate. This appeals specifically to primary school children. There was no similar role for older children at the time, or young adults. Sophie McKeon is the third Young People's Laureate, following Martin Dawes and Catherine Fisher, and she's very active with groups of vulnerable young people, including young mothers and young carers. Participation is at the root of a number of our activities by now, and this focus has enabled us to push those boundaries. It forces us to assess and consider very deeply all the provision in the literary field, and it enables us as an institution and as officers to develop and question ourselves. As well as this, it provides a new provision, an exciting provision to a number of authors that we're working with. Staying still is a very dangerous thing, and we as institutions need to be open at all times to adapt and change ourselves in order to face new challenges. So finance is not always the end of the story. There are other deep challenges concerned with training and coordination as well. How do we prepare that fleet of experienced authors to work in a new field? And how do we contact each other better, avoiding recreation of the wheel? How do we realise that aim of tackling all the social problems of our age? And how do we, as artists and artistic institutions, reduce poverty? The government's report, Transforming Futures, that was devised by the National Museum, notes poverty does not mean financial need or employment only. One must also consider poverty in terms of lack of opportunity, expression, motivation and aspiration. And since 2007, Literature Wales has been running an outreach programme called the South Wales Literary Development Scheme. The aim of it is to offer creative events for groups and individuals who don't have easy access to the arts and mainstream arts as well. And it's reliant on working with a number of local authorities such as Bridgend, Bryn Gwent, Caerphilly, Merthyr Tydfil, Monmouthshire, Neathport Talbot and Rhondda Cynon Taf. Every event is organised carefully with our partners and is tailored specifically for the nature of that specific group. Almost 40,000 people have taken part in that very wide range of literary events with this scheme, and since it was established. But at the same time, Literature Wales has been holding a similar scheme in Gwynedd in partnership with Gwynedd County Council. This scheme has been focusing on provision for young people, and one of the greatest successes was the writing squad there. Over the years, a very high percentage of the main winners of the Eisteddfod literary competitions are former members of the Gwynedd writing squad. And as well as this, a number of workshops were prepared for older people, including in care homes and with dementia patients. You can imagine that the sensitive awareness of language is essential whilst working in these fields. It's our challenge over the next few years to combine these local projects, reaching out to other areas in the North, Mid Wales and the West. The name of this ambitious scheme, this new ambitious scheme, will be Llyn Pawb, or Lit Reach. And we will be using this literature in order to improve the general welfare of the most vulnerable people in these areas, contributing towards skills and the confidence of participants, developing a range of specialist partners in the fields of health and welfare, poverty and young people, working intensely within those specific communities and developing the practice and professional skills of authors who work in these fields. We will, of course, be working with a wide range of partners, from artistic companies and heritage to health boards and housing associations, areas of innovation, sports clubs, local charities and so on, in order to develop groups and specific communities as well. Now, these will include young carers, long-term sufferers of pain and residents of residential home, asylum seekers, refugees, disabled people, prisoners, homeless people, ethnic minorities and LGBT people. And these participants will be working individually and in groups under the leadership of authors and professional artists to create animated films, graphic novels, hip-hop tracks, theatre scripts, poetry slams, reading clubs, football commentary, short stories, just to name a few. A number of these participants could then develop to become those that actually hold these workshops themselves in time and to be leaders within their own communities. One challenge for us as we work together on these aims is how do we go about it to collect long-term evidence on the value of participative activities. Well, one thing is to say that 16 young boys enjoyed making a comic, but it's another thing to analyse what effect this work has on them in the future when they'll be in their 20s, 30s, 40s even. In the field of reading and literacy internationally, we get a number of reports, and they stem from deep research. Agencies such as the National Literacy Trust, the Reading Agency and the United Nations have shown different analyses that show that reading for pleasure is an obvious method of overcoming poverty. Research work from America shows the link between access to libraries amongst young black men and their likelihood of being in prison when they're older. Other projections from within and other projects from within prisons show clearly the progress made within empathy amongst prisoners as they read novels of fiction. So one of the subjects of this conference, identifying what the principles are, the principles of quality, in other words, how to measure the standard and value of art within the participative context, is essential. And it's essential that all of us, as organisers, artists, makers of budgets and policymakers, ask ourselves all the time whether we understand and appreciate these principles. During the next few months and years, Literature Wales, along with all its partners, will continue to reflect and challenge ourselves on how we work participatively. There is an opportunity here to look beyond Wales for inspiration. There are institutions in the United States and Ireland, for example, Urban Word New York, Narrative 4 Limerick and Valencia 826 San Francisco, offering new models and exciting models of working. They consider themselves to be activists, and they use literary exercises in order to develop empathy amongst fractured communities and in the end build bridges. The world by now has changed quite a lot, and the future for everybody is very uncertain, particularly to those most vulnerable in our midst. We all have a role to play to be activists and builders of bridges. As a young person who took part in a slam workshop in Neath said,
I know I can't change my past, but I can write my future.
Thank you very much.